Hello, this is Michael McGee, also known as You're Next. This is not a video that I wanted to make. I was hoping my fifth video would be sort of a victory lap, but this is far from it. I had made a video series exploring the idea that the PCA is no longer a schismatic denomination through our connection to the Reformed Presbyterian Church General Synod. About a week ago, I took all of those videos down as I can really no longer stand by all of what I said. I'm like any man, I want to win an argument, but I also want to be on the side of truth. So what happened? I was being challenged by the other side. I was told that I was ignoring facts and arguing based on vibes. And I'm a keyboard warrior, and I really was going to set the record straight again about that. And I started re-looking at the sources, kind of building up my arguments, and I realized that I had in fact made a historical error, particularly concerning the Old Light, New Light split in 1833. And so I'm going to briefly run down here what I thought happened in 1833 and why I thought that, and then now what my understanding is about what happened. So very quickly, Reformed Presbyterian Church is growing in America in the 1790s, early 1800s, and initially they would meet in one, we had a presbytery, and then we had one synod, and then in the 1720s, I think we get at least two synods. There's an Eastern Subordinate Synod and a Western Subordinate Synod, and then there was a new highest court, the General Synod. And at first, that General Synod would meet every few years. Well, early in 1833, some new lights. This is the sort of faction in the Reformed Presbyterians that are kind of more amenable to the new U.S. Constitution. They think maybe it's not so bad, but they wanted to publish a sermon that sort of expressed that. And this was not seen in a good light by some old lights, the people that are kind of like, no, unless there's sort of really an express acknowledgement of Christianity as the religion of the United States, or at least that Christianity is the religion that ought to be, then you really shouldn't say anything favorable about the Constitution. And I'm making that a very short summation. But anyway, New Lights wanted to publish this, these pastors, and they were in the Eastern Synod is where they wanted to do this. And so some of these Eastern Synod elders, they decided to have a pro re nata meeting. So it's like an emergency meeting. How are we going to deal with these pamphleteers? And not everyone shows up to that pro re nata meeting. But those who do show up, they write up these charges of libel, and I think it's like 3 ministers that they're going after. And now, later, a regular session of the Eastern Subordinate Synod meets, and these 3 ministers do not show up, and so they're like tried in absentia, and they are suspended from ministry, excommunicated, and they don't show up probably because they don't want to be in the crosshairs of this old light group, who are, they're angry enough to have a pro re nata meeting. They probably knew what was coming, but they went further than that, and they met in these ministers that didn't show up and were excommunicated, met in a sort of they made their own little Eastern Subordinate Synod, so kind of an extra legal one. And, that was a little murky to me when I made my first video, but it's kind of a strange thing. We don't really have synods in the PCA, but you can kind of imagine if like half a presbytery didn't like the other half, and so they set up their own presbytery. Not really okay. But it's not really a schism from the denomination, but kind of a schism within the denomination, but still not okay. So one of these men who did this, I believe his name is Crawford. Now, he's the former moderator of the General Synod, so the big court. And he when the General Synod finally meets, on paper, he's excommunicated and suspended from ministry. But he gets up to speak, And he, as is the custom, the moderator gets up. He's shouted down by the old lights. So far, so good. Now, my old understanding was that he was replaced by his alternate, but that his prosecutors, the old lights, I mean, they shortly after they got up, walked out of the meeting, and so it's kind of like, well, case dismissed. I was very wrong about this particular point. When I was going back to cite some evidence in kind of my argument I was going to type out, I looked. I didn't think I was going to find an error, but I did. I first looked at Hutchinson, and he didn't mention this, and I thought, well, that's odd. He doesn't mention that the moderator was replaced. And then when I looked at Glasgow, he mentions the old lights putting in an alternate when they set up their own synod down across town. And I thought, well, where did I get this idea that the General Synod did the right thing? And it hit me. I read it in the minutes of the meeting. So I go back to the Internet Archive where you can see these things. They're scanned, and I'm sure it's still there. Anyway, it turns out the minutes I was reading were from the Old Light Synod that had formed later across town, not the New Light General Synod, which is what I thought I was reading. Why did I make this mistake? Well, for one thing, the cover, it's a scanned copy, so I think it's the original from 1833. It may be a later copy, but it's old. But it says on the cover, Reformed Presbyterian Church in America, General Synod, 1833, printed in Pittsburgh. Okay, so also the archivist had put the author as the Reformed Presbyterian Church General Synod as the author, and even had a little note that said, this group went on until 1965. So the archivist made a mistake, and you know what, I really don't blame them, because these groups are carrying the same name for a time. And where are the real New Light meeting minutes? They may no longer exist. And my understanding is there was a church fire in New York in the 1950s, and much of the material that did exist is now gone. But also, and I want to say this because I don't really want to let myself off the hook, I should have double, triple checked, and I should have looked over things again. And when I went back to look at the other sources I'd been examining with this new understanding, they made a lot more sense. And really, it should have been obvious to me that what I read was not correct. And I'm like, when I realized I made the mistake, you can imagine the cascade of regret that washed over me, and just feeling, boy, this was really dumb. But why did I accept the first thing that I read and go with that? I basically am going to say that I think it was my own confirmation bias. I suppose I wanted it to be true, and so, it wasn't exactly conscious that I did this, but I think I went with that. And so I have to apologize, because I made an amateur mistake, and it led, it was a historical error that led to some erroneous conclusions. And so I'm sorry to anybody who depended on me as a source, and I can't really go back and undo what I did, but it's like my pastor always says, you can always do the next right thing. And so that's why I'm here. That's what I'm doing. But back to 1833. The short of it is, not only did the New Lights not replace the moderator, they appear to have been sort of forcing this defrocked moderator onto the General Synod meeting. So due process would dictate that this man be removed. Now, whether his excommunication by the Eastern Synod or his suspension was warranted or not, you gotta go through the process. He's gotta go through the trial before he can be restored. That's the right thing to do. The Old Lights, who according to Glasgow were in the voting majority at the General Synod meeting, they walked out at this point because they didn't want this guy forced on them. Now, why didn't they just stay anyway? Could they not, as the majority, have gotten their own way in the end? I don't know. It seems that the moderator was a personal friend of the clerk of the synod, And I think perhaps they feared a procedural obstruction. I mean, it was kind of already happening. Also, the church that the General Synod met in was a New Light church, sympathetic with these guys. And so, and they had called the Philadelphia police, such as that was in 1833, to kind of be there in case there was a disruption. So maybe they were intimidated. Now, Redeemed Zoomer has said that allowing this suspended moderator to speak actually confirms this schism and this little Eastern subordinate little schism that happened. So when the Old Lights left the meeting, and they were the majority, they had in effect already been schismed from by the New Lights. Is that accurate? I don't know. It's a little bit of a gray area. Like I said, it was a schism within the denomination and not away from it. Presumably, the credentials of those who showed up at General Synod were accepted. And so I could make the case that, they all seem to recognize this was the meeting to be at. And everybody, if the Eastern Subordinate Synod was left already, would they have been allowed to be there? I don't know. Like I said, it's a gray area, and I could make the case that suffering one failure of due process, having having to suffer with one suspended minister as your moderator and his officious clerk friend, is that really grounds for separation? I mean, which is worse, killing God or having a moderator who should be suspended? I mean, but that, it doesn't really matter, because that's not the case that I want to make. Fact is, I am more sympathetic with the Old Lights now in this than I was before. I think I would have walked out. But then, I would walk out of a church that had a pastorette come up to the pulpit. I'd walk out of an assembly that had 50% female ruling elders. I would walk out if an imam got up to give the prayer of invocation. I'm gone. See ya. I mean, I'm not going to do that. Now, not everything I said was incorrect in the videos that I made. For example, there was not a 12-year gap. I'm sticking with that one until some further evidence comes my way. That said, I'm a New Light. And now what I know about this 1833 split, whether there was a 12-year gap or not in the 18th century, doesn't really affect me at this point. So I'm not gonna stay with that unless something comes up later and I need to. But in the end, I regret that I made the mistake that kind of led me to spend a lot of time making these videos. It wasn't everything I said was wrong, but there's this one weak link, and it just kind of undercuts everything else I was trying to say. But I'm glad, if I hadn't made the mistake, I probably wouldn't have made any of the videos, and I wouldn't have been moved to investigate the Covenanters or the Reformed Presbyterians, and I'm glad I know a lot more about them than I did. I'm very glad to be connected to those groups, even though it's not in the way that I would have wished or that I believed. I had hoped by this little exercise of mine to, at least by Redeemed Zoomer's own concept of what mainlineanity is, to prove that the PCA is mainline. Some are persuaded by his arguments, and this bothers them, that the PCA may not be mainline. Anyway, I don't think I achieved that, and I wish I'd not made the mistakes I made. But now, am I going to join the PCUSA? No way. Am I a coward? Yeah, I guess. It's kind of like Hamlet says, conscience makes cowards of us all. My conscience won't let me. I wouldn't go to a PCUSA church for the same reason I would have walked out of the General Synod in 1833. As Glasgow might have said, they're walking disorderly, but I would say the PCUSA is walking disorderly on steroids. I'm a family man. I can't have my wife, who I'm supposed to present blameless, and my children sitting under false teachers. No way. If my family's going to go to the devil, it's not going to be with any help from me. maybe, you know, some of my friends were rooting for me and in this, and I'm sorry to them that this didn't work out the way I thought it was going to. I think some probably thought I was on a fool's errand, and I think it's worse than they thought I was like a fool on a fool's errand. But the bottom line is PCA has the marks of the church. I worship with the PCA saints this morning. It was glorious. It always is. I'm going again tonight. I can't wait. Again, I want to just say, give you my apologies for my errors of fact and of conclusion. So thank you for watching this, and don't forget, you're next.